When the news came down Tuesday that head coach Ben McAdoo was benching Eli Manning, Twitter exploded, NFL media exploded, and understandably so. You're talking about a quarterback with the last name of Manning who plays in the biggest media market in the country getting benched in the middle of a lost season for the New York Giants. I can understand why so many people are up in arms about it. I can see why so many people are wondering what the world is going on here. And a lot of that has to do with Eli Manning being Eli Manning. And here's what I mean. Here's a guy you're talking about was the number one pick in that 2004 draft class, that great quarterback class that is only a step below the legendary class of 83 when you're talking about Eli number 1, Phillip Rivers being drafted number 4, Big Ben going number 11. You're talking about three quarterbacks who probably will end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame someday. And Eli Manning had a streak of 210 consecutive starts, which we know how legendary that is in the grand scheme of football. Brett Favre looks down upon him, and that's about it. To be able to answer the bell time after time after time for over a decade, so many Giants fans knew, whether they always liked it or not, that they could count on Eli to play. He had the ability of availability like few other quarterbacks in NFL history, which is incredibly impressive considering there was very little athleticism and mobility from Eli Manning. He took a lot of big hits over the years. A guy with 4,000 plus yard passing seasons, over 50,000 career passing yards, 3 seasons with 30 plus touchdowns, a career touchdown to interception ratio of 334 to 222, an 8-4 career playoff record, and 2 Lombardi trophies. You're talking about a guy that's been a star and a big name quarterback for a long time. So you have a lot of people, which is ironic because a lot of the people that seem to be up in arms about this, between fans and media types, are the same ones that have questioned Eli Manning over the years, crapped on Eli Manning over the years, bashed Eli Manning over the years, and now all of a sudden they're upset and ticked off that the guy got benched in the fashion that he did. And they can't believe that this has happened, and da-da-da-da-da. You know, it's one of these things where I will say this about Eli Manning. I've been pretty consistent about since day one that I haven't been a huge fan of his. I thought coming out of Ole Miss he was massively overrated in that quarterback class compared to Big Ben and Rivers. I thought if his jersey didn't have a last name of Manning on there, he was largely just going to be another guy. I thought he was just a step above a mediocre prospect in that draft class. Then you had the saga of what went down about he didn't want to play in San Diego, and him and Archie were saying San Diego don't draft us, so of course they did. And you can make the argument that long term the Manning family was right about not wanting him to play in San Diego. Look what happened to Phillip Rivers' career there and now in Los Angeles with that Chargers organization. But it's one of those things that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And just kind of over the years, watching Eli Manning and his pouty face and his consistent inability to hit running backs and wide receivers in the flat. I mean, this guy has been terrible at times when it comes to the guy is wide open and he throws it 3 yards short or 5 yards over his damn head. And Giants fans know exactly what I'm talking about. The real truth of the matter is, I've never really got it. It's great and all and wonderful that he has 2 Lombardi trophies. Okay? But so does Jim Plunkett. And we're not beating down the door for Jim Plunkett to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, nor should we. He got 2 rings, but he didn't even start off those 2 seasons for the Raiders in 80 and 83 respectively, if memory serves me correctly, as the actual primary starter for those teams. And when you look at Eli Manning, it's somewhat comparable to Jim Plunkett in terms of he's got the 2 rings, but nobody ever thinks of him as like a creme de la creme type of quarterback. He's much better than Jim Plunkett, but it's always the comparison that I make. It's people will use that argument of, well, he won 2 rings. Yeah, but Eli was largely mediocre, and Giants fans damn good and well know it. His career win-loss record is 110 and 100 as a starter, so just a little bit above 500. You had 3 seasons where he led the league in interceptions, 3 seasons there with more than 20 interceptions, 20, 25, and 27. That's no legend. That's no elite quarterback. 5 seasons with the completion percentage under 60. Never had a season where he had a completion percentage above 65%. He only made 6 playoff appearances in 12 full seasons. And look, I understand it's a team thing. There's a lot of different things at play there. But ultimately, like with his brother, you give him so much credit for when things go well, and you must also give him some of the responsibility because he is part of it when things aren't so well. And ultimately, he was supposed to be a franchise quarterback, and you have a franchise quarterback. In theory, you should make the playoffs more than half the time. And they made the playoffs half the time in his 12 full seasons as a starter between 2005 and 2016. And everybody talks about the 2 Super Bowl runs, but they forget about the 4 one-and-done trips in the playoffs, the other mediocre seasons, and in general, just when you look at the Giants over the years, they've had a couple of aberrations and fluke seasons with 2007 and 2011 that led to the Lombardi trophies, but they've largely been a mediocre team during that time frame because their leader was mediocre. I mean, you look at Eli and the pouty, dumb, stupid look he has on his face, and you say, that's no leader of men. That's no true blue star. That's no big-time elite quarterback, and he's not. To me, he's always been slightly better than mediocre, and that's it. But he plays in the biggest media market in the country. His brother was paid, I will always give him his dap because Eli had moments that, unlike his brother, when it really mattered, he came up and he came up big. But even when you cite the 2 Super Bowl argument, you got to remember that 2007 season, you're going up against the Giants, the Patriots, who were undefeated and staring down history, and that Giants defensive front 4 just caused havoc for Tom Brady all game long. And Eli Manning, while he made a great play evading the sack late in the game, he still threw up some Eli type of bullshit and got lucky for David Tyree to pin the ball against his helmet. And then a few years later in the next Super Bowl, if you don't get one of those once-in-a-lifetime catches from Mario Manningham, I mean, Eli might not have any rings. He might have 2 Super Bowl losses. So to me, just slightly better than mediocre. He ends up getting in the Hall of Fame because his numbers are adequate over a sustained period of time, even though he's had some really bad play mixed in there. And he does have those 2 rings as a franchise type of quarterback. But he's never been great. And let's face it, the media should know this, and Giants fans in particular should know this. He's not great. He never has been great. He never will be great. Period. Suck it. That said, though, the decision to bench Eli Manning on the surface might piss off a lot of people, but it was absolutely the right move in the sense of this is an organization going nowhere. This was in particular a team in 2017 that was going absolutely nowhere. You are 2-9. You're not making the playoffs. You have nothing to play for this year except draft position. And long term, you know that Eli, being in his late 30s, is not going to be your guy much longer. So, for all these people that are upset about how they handled it into this and into that, and saying he's not to blame, no, you know what? Eli Manning's not to blame, solely. But again, when a team does well, a quarterback tends to get the lion's share of the credit. When things don't go well, a quarterback is a part of that team, and as a result, deserves some of the blame. And I hate when people say, well, the team is playing poorly, you can't blame Eli. Yes, you can, because he is part of that team. That does not mean he should be solely or exclusively blamed. But to say that he deserves no blame or no criticism is complete and total mark crap. And you know it. You know it, Giants fans. You know it, media. You know it, people. It's absolute and complete bunk. And to me, you've seen a guy that has been in decline the past couple of seasons. When people say, well, he hasn't really been in decline, look at his numbers. It's a lot easier to not look in decline when you have Odell Beckham Jr. to throw to. But once you don't have Odell Beckham Jr. to throw to, what happens? You throw for about 130, 140 yards a game and you look terrible. You can't go through your progressions. You can't hit guys consistently when you need to. You miss on incredibly easy throws. The story of Eli Manning's career. So this whole decision to bench Eli, in theory, makes perfect sense. This whole thing about, well, he's earned the right to continue to start, Well, then maybe he should have played better along with the rest of the team. And ultimately, his team is 2-9. And when he's a late 30s quarterback, you're talking about the thought of whether or not you would even want to keep him in 2018 and have that huge cap hit, having to pay out that $5 million roster bonus. No, it makes perfect sense. And people say, well, looking at how you handle it, how else were you really supposed to handle it? To say that Ben McAdoo shouldn't sit there and say it's a football decision, you think Geno Smith gives you the best chance to win. What's he supposed to say is that we don't want to play Eli anymore to risk him getting hurt, so we can either A, trade him, or B, release him, and him getting hurt would potentially impede that, and B, we're trying to tank the rest of the games this year so we can get into a marquee draft position to take a big-name quarterback in the 2018 draft. What else is he supposed to say? What else is he supposed to say? No, benching Eli is the right move. You have nothing to play for, and he is not your future. There comes a point in time where it's like, thanks for all you've done, but it is time to move on, and that time has come for the New York Giants. As painful it is for some of their fans, including the fans that have crapped on Eli a lot over the years, that all of a sudden have this newfound love affair for him. What's really stupid about it, though, is that Geno Smith is the guy getting the opportunity when you've just spent a third-round pick on Davis Webb. And if Davis Webb was Geno Smith and Geno Smith was Davis Webb, I would say the exact same thing. It's one thing to sit there and bench Eli. It's another thing to bench Eli and use somebody else's cast-off, also-ran, crappy quarterback instead of the guy you just took in the third round. Why would you not want to get a look at that kid that you drafted in the third round, give him 5 games to see if he shows you anything, to maybe where you say, A, we definitely need a quarterback in this upcoming draft, or B, maybe it's not as much of a priority as we initially thought. By sitting there and starting Geno Smith, you're not getting the ability to look at Davis Webb. You know Geno Smith's not the guy. You know he's not going to be your long-term answer. You know he has no chance of that. That's not going to happen, so why the fuck is he playing? That's what's really mind-blowing to me about this. It's one thing to bench Eli in a lost season, especially when, to me, it's an organizational decision saying, hey, we want to keep Eli healthy for the reasons I just mentioned, and B, we want to keep losing games because we want to be in that position because I believe the Giants have identified as an organization the quarterback that they like in that 2018 draft. But why the fuck would you not play Davis Webb? That's what I don't get. And then furthermore, while Eli should be benched, and I will continue to agree with that, and it's not about bias, it's not about hate, it's about long-term picture for this New York Giants organization. He's not your future. Your present sucks. You should be thinking about something else. It's, how did Ben McAdoo not get benched? How does he still have a job? He has lost his team. He has lost his locker room. He clearly has no clue what the hell he is doing. He is in over his head. And I don't care if the Giants don't traditionally fire coaches in the season. Just because you've done it in the past and it's not a precedent you've set before, doesn't mean that it's not the time to do so. The dude is a clown. And if we're going to hold Eli Manning somewhat or solely responsible or largely responsible, which is somewhat unfair, although he is a part of the team, he is the leader of the team as the franchise quarterback, he does deserve blame. Why are we not blaming the head coach? Why does he still have a job? And ultimately, when you look at this team, for a team that has drafted pretty poorly in recent years and has tried to plug some of those gaps with free agency, knowing that that's not a permanent solution, how does Jerry Reese still have a job? And to sit there and think about it from a Giants organization standpoint and say, hey, we're going to bench Eli, we're going to lose the rest of these games and get into the position to draft another quarterback, the guy to lead us to the future. Why in the bluest of blue fucks would you want Jerry Reese to be the guy to make that call? What has he done for you in recent years that indicates that he is the right guy to make that call? That's what I don't get about this whole thing. Is Eli Manning getting benched is one thing. That's fine. To me, that is justified. The fact that you would start Geno Smith over Davis Webb when you have just invested a third-round pick in Davis Webb makes absolutely zero sense to me. And the fact that Ben McAdoo is allowed to make this call and allowed to still have a job when players don't care, they are not putting in effort, they are not trying hard, to me is absolutely inexcusable. If Eli Manning needed to be benched, and I agree that he did, then Ben McAdoo should have been benched, and he should have been promoted to fan, and what I mean by that is he got his ass fucking fired. The fact that he still has a job is the thing that really should upset people, and I think it does. The fact that he's the one that made this call and was allowed to make this call and still has a job with this lost season and how bad he's lost this team is the biggest crock of shit of all.